If you're ready to take control of your mornings and stop snoozing, rolling over, pulling the covers over your head, and hiding from your greatness, I would love for you to join us in the free 30-day Morning Mastery Challenge. In this challenge, we'll be using proven strategies and techniques that I have used in multiple areas in my life and that I have helped my clients use in so many different areas to shift habits in a positive way to start creating the dream life we want to create. If you're ready to start shifting your mornings so that they're not groggy, they're not snoozing, they're not constantly starting with you feeling behind, if you're ready to take control and start creating that dream life today, I would love for you to go to the show notes and click the link or visit overcominggraduation.com/morningmastery. That's overcominggraduation.com/morningmastery. We are super excited about this. The group is already growing, and if you're ready, we'd love for you to be a part of it. The challenge kicks off November 21st, 2018. So for those of you that are ready, we will see you on the inside. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Overcoming Graduation with Brian Drury, a show where I work to teach you everything I wished I'd known about life to help you graduate to the next level in your own. Today we have an interview with an incredible guest who goes by the name of Mike Domitrz, who will share his story of how he moved from pain to purpose and speak on the concepts of respect, mutuality, and how to help victims of sexual violence. Mike knew from a very young age that he was destined to be on stage. He knew without a shadow of a doubt that one day he was going to be an actor and a performer on Broadway and in movies. In his freshman year of college, he was making that dream come true as he pursued it with all his passion. He was even hosting his own show, so things seemed to be going on the right track. But everything came to a screeching halt when he was 19 years old, and he got a phone call from his mom that changed everything. His mother called to let him know that his youngest sister had been raped. He felt lost, furious, depressed, and wasn't sure if he would ever be able to come to terms with what he'd just been told. Until one day, when he saw a man presenting about how to help stop sexual assault and violence. Mike went up to that man afterwards and said, "I want to do something about this." And from that moment forward, his life has never been the same. Now Mike is a world-renowned speaker and author who is working to shift the culture we live in from one of permission to one of mutuality and respect. Mike believes that culture changes one person at a time and is working to spread that message to the masses. He's worked with the Department of Defense, NBC, the Wall Street Journal, Princeton University, the Houston Texans, and many more. In today's episode, Mike will discuss how to help victims of traumatic events, sexual violence, and more. The best thing to say to someone when they share something painful they're going through, and this one is huge, guys, huge. What to do to pull yourself out of your darkest moments. How to deal with hecklers and the importance of leading with love. Why we need to empower instead of protect, and this is particularly for parents on how they can best support their children. Permission versus mutuality and how it can change your life. Why culture is singular and how we can use that understanding to change the world. This interview with Mike was hugely illuminating for me. It helped me reframe and shift a perspective on many things that I think we as a culture just unconsciously accept. Of this is the way things are. Why would you ask to kiss someone? That's not what people want. These things that we're told or we see in movies that maybe a man is meant to be a certain way, and if he is confident, he'll just go up and dive in for the kiss, and that's what a woman wants. And Mike totally flips that on its ear in such a positive way and talks about the power, the beauty, and the passion that can erupt from a person when there's consent, there's respect, and there are healthy barriers and boundaries that we create for ourselves and that our romantic partners maintain. So, tons of interesting content, tons of actionable advice. If you know people who are going through difficult things, if you're going through it yourself, if you are a parent. So, this interview is full of nuggets of wisdom, and I'm really excited to share this one out to you guys. So, without any further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Mike Domitrz. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
I am excited to dive into your story, and your work and what you do now is different than any other guest that I've had on the show. And it is an incredibly, well, it's a topic overall, but there are so many subtopics within it that we're going to dive into today that right now it is in the spotlight. It is something that people need to talk about more, want to talk about more. So I'm really excited to hear your story and hear your insights on the best ways that people can go about behaving, respecting, and so much more. So I won't give away anything for the listeners, but as we talked about in pre-show, I always like to start off at the inception point or the jump-off point. And for you, the best jump-off point, it sounds like, was high school graduation, because you had an idea of what your life was going to look like and where you were going to go. So can you tell the listeners about what life looked like for Mike Domitrz when you were back graduating high school and what your plans were for life?
Oh, I knew exactly what I wanted. I was going to be on Broadway, and then I was going to be in film, and that was the plan. And that had been my plan for years. I had been doing theater in high school. I was fortunate. I grew up in a small town where there was the university was the largest employer, and I had been fortunate to do theater in college while in high school at one point. So my plan was to be an actor, and that was my focus. And I was accepted to a school that I loved, the theater program up in a major city in Chicago. So everything was lining up for me to be that actor.
That's so interesting because I had no idea about that. And so everything's lining up. You've decided on acting. And did you have a specific focus where you wanted to be in TV or film or Broadway? You said Broadway in particular. Was it something where that was the main focus, or you were going to be diving into all different areas?
In the 80s, and I don't know if it's still true today in the industry, I don't think it is as much because film and TV has become such powerful medium and such great acting. But in the 80s, TV was almost looked down upon by the acting community. And I think today there's so much good TV that has changed that image. So my mindset was Broadway. It was to be a star in Broadway. You know, the old song, On Broadway. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a singer. I was an actor. Very key to understand that. Super important. I could act and I could dance. I was not a singer.
That's fantastic because it's, again, I don't think anyone else on the show has said that was the focus. And it's also interesting to see how different life has turned out because of a mission that came into your life. So you were going to be an actor. You had these plans. Everything was set. You go into college. And can you tell the listeners about what that next step looked like?
Yeah, so I go to college, and I'm somebody who likes to dive in and do new things and totally get into them. So I go to college, and I had a swimming background. My whole family was competitive swimmers. I had three older sisters who were amazing swimmers. Like, as in one of them was a swam for the Big Ten on full ride scholarship, incredibly successful. So, I mean, that's what I grew up around. So I had a high school that didn't have a swim team. So I swam club, but did it my last year of high school and went to college and thought, maybe I'll try being on the college team, which was so weird because it was a Division I team, NCAA Division I team, and I was no way in that category. But they had a men's water polo team that was ranked top 10 in the country, and silly me, so naive, walked onto that, and they took me. That was the crazy part. So, and I'd never played water polo.
Wow.
So I walked onto the 10th ranked team in the country, and suddenly I'm training every day insanely for water polo. And they were the same team that did the NCAA swimming too. They combined is what they did. So it was a nutty experience. And I was doing theater at the university. And what was ironic is I was fortunate that I was cast in every show in some role. Might have been a small role, but I was cast in every show in some capacity that first year of college. So I was just loving college. I was doing theater. I was doing water polo, and then I went away and I worked summer resorts between the summers. And when I say summer resorts, I mean literally think Dirty Dancing. That's what I did.
So you had the dancing background, so you were good.
So I was a waiter all day at these resorts. You get the same family all week, just like in the movie Dirty Dancing. And then a couple nights a week, there'd be a talent show or something like that, and I was a dancer. I actually had my own dance routine. And so that's literally what I love, Dirty Dancing. I was doing that. Come back to college, sophomore year, one of the first days back on campus, and I come back to my room, and there's a note on my door. It says, Mike, call home immediately. I'm going, oh, what did I do? That kind of thing was in my
Right.
mind, like, uh-oh, you're a college student, uh-oh, what did I do? I call home, and my mom, I can tell something's wrong right away. I can tell by the tone, and my mom asked me if I'm sitting down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who died?
Right.
Is what was going through my mind. I didn't say it out loud, but I was starting to prepare myself. It was grandparents, an aunt, an uncle. And weirdly, you're ready for that call. Like, okay, this can happen. Like, your brain starts to prep you. And my mom says, Mike, Sherry's been raped. And Sherry's the youngest of my sisters. All my sisters are older, but she's the youngest of my older sisters. I can't believe what I'm hearing. I'm in shock. I am confused. I'm devastated. I'm lost. And I would get off that phone, and those feelings would just overwhelm me. And one thing that they said on the phone was, or I misinterpreted on the phone, this had only happened 4 hours earlier before I got the phone call.
Wow.
And so it was still an investigation process. And so there was something about it still investigation for the next 24 hours. Something, don't say something, is what I thought they said to me. So I thought what they said was, you can't talk about this to anyone. So now I've been hit with all of this, and I'm sure looking back, that's not what they said, but it's what I heard. And so I've been hit with all of this and been told, don't talk. Well,
Wow.
I am built to figure things out by talking out loud. That's how I operate. That's how my brain works. So now this is all going on, and I can't turn to my best friends. In my mind, I say, I can't even tell my best friend because I don't want to do anything that could cause harm. And so I'm walking around with this for months before I tell anyone close to me. And I'm just crashing is what's happening. I go from being a very good student to being a really in bad grade situations. And I call home and say, I'm transferring. I want to come back home to the local campus, and I'm going to study business. And my parents asked, what is going on? Is there drugs? Is there gambling? Why would you leave your dream? Everything's because I was stage managing a show beginning of my sophomore year. I was stage managing a main stage show as a sophomore, which is pretty rare. So they're like, what? Something's not adding up. And my sister Sherry got it. She's like, he's struggling with what's happening. She got it because she knew how close we were. But it was difficult for others. And my parents knew I was struggling. They knew how much I loved my sister, but it was still odd for them to think, how could you leave all these dreams? And I transferred home to be close to home near the trial. And ironically, I went into business because when this happened to my sister, theater scared me, and that I didn't think I could have a steady life going forward in a life of theater. I couldn't have family. I couldn't be there for family. You'd be out performing all the time.
Right.
And so I switched to business to have security and safety. And that is very ironic, looking at what I've done with my life since then. But it was what I was searching for, was that safety and security. And then I was an athlete on that, so I was swimming. Now, for my mom was the head coach of the college team at the university I was at. And I was swimming there, but I was still struggling because I was still struggling to figure out how to deal with all these emotions. And we had to go see a speaker. And the speaker's name was Joseph Weinberg, and he was speaking on sexual assault. And at that time, nobody spoke about sexual assault. And I sat in the audience next to all the other athletes were forced to go. And I heard people going, well, this is silly. I don't know anyone this has happened to. And my head just kept saying, yes, they do. They know my sister. Yes, they do, but they don't recognize it. And my brain kept saying that. And my brain kept saying, wait, I could do something about this. I could speak up. I could do something about this. And I went up to the speaker, and I said, I want to do something about this. And he said, oh, okay, well, if you really do, I live in Madison, which happened to be an hour away, so I got lucky there. Well, I showed up. And he said, no one ever shows up after making that statement. You showed up. I'll give you everything I've got. And he did. And I'm so grateful for that. And then I went home and wrote this speech based on a combination of what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and all these stats and data he gave me and sheets he gave me. And I went to my local high school from a teacher I knew and said, could I talk in your classroom? And I'm still friends with her today, Judy. And she said yes. And when I was done in that classroom, she said, Mike, why aren't you doing this all over? And that's where it began. I was 20, 21 years old, and it began in that classroom, and a teacher believing in me. And then I reached out to local schools, and a teacher by the name of Debbie Bartholomew at an alternative school in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, let me come into her school, who didn't know me. Mm-hmm. To this day, I still talk to her classes. We're talking 28 years later. I still go into her classes every year. It's been an amazing journey.
And there's so many pieces to that I think are just incredible, because what people hear is the very quick synopsis of the story of this horrible trauma, like something I can't even begin to imagine. The thought of it makes my insides churn, of someone I love going through that. But I know there are certain things that we can't fully understand unless we actually experience them. And to see how you took this pain and you took the combination of your different skill sets, your performing, being on stage, being lively, entertaining, funny for people, and then combining that with a deeply powerful and important message. I think that is so critical. But also, I really want the listeners to pay attention to the impact that your words and your support can have on someone, especially early on. Just that one teacher at first who said, you can come speak to my class, and then that one teacher you didn't know who said, you can come speak to mine. And they said, Mike, you've got something here. That was enough for you to say, you know what, it's time, I'm leaning in. And that's absolutely incredible. And before we continue with your story, as I've gone back and spoken at college campuses now, I'm seeing more and more the anxiety and the stress and the depression that kids are facing. And again, many times when we're going through depression, we don't even know why. We're not even sure. In this case, you had a very clear reason why, and something to overcome, to face, to battle. So when it comes to dealing with the emotional strains, stresses, and challenges in life and the traumas of life, can you give some advice to young adults on the things that helped you through those battles?
Well, I wasn't good at it early on, as you heard, because I struggled and my grades crashed. And my parents had, even after a semester at Whitewater, when I came back to Whitewater, my grades were struggling. And keep in mind, my dad was the dean of the business school that I was struggling in. So a lot of those professors personally knew me and were watching me struggle, or knew of me because of my dad. And my mom was my coach. And so my first semester, my grades still weren't popping up right away. I was struggling. And what happened was they said, look, if you're not going to be able to focus, then we're not going to be paying for a college that you're not focusing on. Like that. They had that conversation with me. And I got angry. I got angry, and I said, oh, yeah? Watch me. That's not the way I've ever talked to my parents. Like, that was not our relationship. And I remember the look on their faces like, excuse me? Like, what did you just say? And then I became determined of, I'm going to do something with it. Like, I'm going to make a difference here. And sadly for me, it was being challenged and the ego stepping up and going, oh, yeah? Watch what I'm about to do. That's not the healthiest way to get into this. But what happened was that set me on a path of, I have a mission here. And I think that's a key. Can you find in your time of struggle, what's a mission that would make you feel good during this struggle? And it doesn't mean you have to take it on for your life. What's a mission at that moment that you could dive into and have somewhere to put all of this confusion and lost energy into a positive energy force? And that doesn't mean you're going to be positive. You might be on a mission that share your anger, but you might speak out from a place of anger, but it has a positive ending. It has a positive ending result in theory. Mine was, I was going to speak out because we had to stop rape. That was my mind. We have to stop this. What happened to my sister is atrocious, and we have to stop this. So I want to make it very clear. I did not start off as a speaker that was entertaining, engaging, and funny. I started off talking about statistics. I talked with anger in my voice because I was an angry brother. And what happened was, when I learned how to shift from angry to engaging, it changed everything. Everything. That was a journey that I had to go on to figure out. And
I'm very curious to hear how you did that. But before we do, I remember when I saw you speak on stage, you shared something that it made me stop and think for a second. And I kind of sat back and said, well, what does he mean here? And you had said you were so angry, and the first thing that came to your mind is, I want to kill this guy. And when you said that, I was like, yep, I totally get it. Like I was like, I imagine if I was in that spot, that's exactly what I'd want to do. But then you said, but if I did that, it would only make things so much worse for me, for Sherry, and for everyone. And that was the piece where I was like, well, wait a second. And as you explained, it started to become so much clearer. So can you explain to the listeners why it would have been so much worse if you had even just been violent or attacked or tried to beat the hell out of this guy who had done this atrocious thing?
Yeah, it would cause so many problems on so many levels. Some of them I wasn't as aware of then as I am now. One is it would have made the survivor, in this case my sister Sherry's life, 10 times worse. And people go, how does it make their life worse? Well, multiple reasons. One, let's say I was able to get to this person. In this case, you weren't able to. They were caught by the police. They were going to prison. There was a trial. So you had no ability to do that, really. And then you think, do I know of anyone who knows anyone in prison? You know, I mean, literally, you're that angry.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, but even there, here's the problem. Let's say you somehow got to that person. They're going to look first at who would have an interest in getting to this person, which means it's coming back at your family.
Mm-hmm. Now
imagine the survivor watching her family deal with that while she's trying to deal with surviving a rape.
Mm-hmm.
It would have made, for that survivor, the trauma you'd be adding, everything you'd be adding would just be horrific. Horrific. Now, I know some people go, well, that's not normally the case. They're not normally caught, and so that's why I'd get them. Okay, let's go down that story then. Then you do go get them. No one knows who did it. What's the survivor your sister start afraid of now? What if they figure out you did it? Who's the survivor likely to blame in that moment? Themselves. The survivor often thinks, if this didn't happen to me, my brother, my dad, my sister, my mom would not have done those things. So now I feel bad that this happened to them. And they start to blame themselves. Totally unfair, because and not all survivors do that, but a lot do. And it's understandable to think that way. But it's totally unfair because the family member or friend caused it, not the survivor. But the survivor is adding more blame onto their plate, which isn't fair to do the survivor. Two, if you do get caught, you will not be able to be there for the survivor. Like, I know people say, but if I go behind bars, it'd be worth it to get the person. You explain that to the survivor who loves you, who can no longer have you in their life because you're behind bars. It'll never pay off. That never pays off. And then you also have the element no one ever thinks about. It is not your choice to decide what happens next. It's the survivors. Rape, sexual assault is about taking away someone's choice. How dare you take away the choice of what happens next on this survivor's journey? Not your place.
Wow. I literally am getting chills because it takes all of the anger and the ego response, like you said before, like, I'll fucking show these people, I'll tell them this is how it's going to be, or I'm going to, and you step back and you think about the person who needs you the most. And there have been many times where I've thought about getting in a fight, or, if I should kick that guy's ass and I'll show them. And that voice popped up for me in different ways of, well, could you be there for the people that need you if you were locked up? Would it really be worth throwing a few punches to just be taken away for years and have the rest of your life impacted? And then that was just about me. This is about something so much more important, where there's someone who's dealing with something traumatic, and your ability to be there and support them is negated by your anger, and desire to get revenge. So I think it's so critical for people to hear, and it's such an important thing to learn, because we, as the listeners and the people learning from you, can take that and understand the best ways we can support. So I think later in the podcast, I'd love to go into specifics about what to do, how to help, how to support, how to be there, and what victims of sexual abuse, assault, rape can do. but I also want to go further down your journey first. So you had said, and as I was reading about your story, I found this to be very interesting, that you said no one was talking about this at the time that you started. And it's almost like you're trying to break into a whole new world, but this is a topic that people were afraid to talk about. Nobody wanted to bring up. They didn't even want to acknowledge it. So what were some of the early battles that you faced in terms of not just getting speaking engagements, but being able to connect with audiences about this topic?
Well, and when I say no one, there were absolutely people out there having the conversation, but mainstream America was not paying attention.
Ah, okay. Mm-hmm.
Right? So there were voices out there, but they were far and few between because nobody would give them traction. And that was the problem, is that nobody was wanting to really address this. When you thought of rape in the late 80s and early 90s, you thought of news coverage of park attack, a alley attack, and a parking lot attack. Those are the three kind of examples that people had in their minds when they thought of this topic. So that was part of the barrier, without a doubt. Second of all, I was young. So you don't have anybody talking about it. You don't have doctorates coming in and talking about it. And here's some 21-year-old guy talking about it. Why would we trust him? And I looked, and I'm not kidding, sadly, 16. So that never helps on a sensitive topic. Because they think, why would I let a kid talk to kids? Why would we do that? At a time when society didn't understand the topic either as a whole. So that was part of the battle. The other battle was that I was angry, as I said earlier, when I would do this. And when in my early versions, and I was speaking in college classes, and then I get feedback that said, wow, you're a man-hater. And I'm like, what? I'm a guy. How can I be a man-hater? That doesn't even make any sense. That's what's going through my head, like, what? And I realized what was happening was the anger, unfortunately, that I was leaking out at times was building a barrier for some of the audience who didn't allow them to hear the message because of the anger. And that's on me. It wasn't on them. If I didn't have that anger leaking out, they might have heard me differently. And I was working in a professor's class who had me in his classes every semester. And he's still here today, a wonderful person, Jerry Witherall. And he would do this. After I'd speak in his class, we would sit down, and he would share me the feedback from the students. So Jerry would be like, hey, Mike, when you do this, they really like it. And what Jerry pointed out is the first time I did an interactive thing where I brought two students up, and we role-played a scene, how everybody lit up, how everybody became engaged. And he's like, that, when you do that, Mike, it's like magical. And that's when I recognized, that's when everything shifted. That's when my whole approach shifted, because I started going, all right, how do I do more of that without not just making it all that, because then you lose message also. But how do I have a really great balance here? And it was working with Jerry and getting feedback and listening, and to other professors who gave me, Charles Zastro and others, who gave me this chance to get in their classrooms and explore with their students and really listening to feedback. I am a person that learns from feedback, and I very much appreciate it.
See, I'm the same way in terms of not only do I think through my problems through talking through them, but I'm really passionate about feedback. And for the listeners, I really want you to hear what Mike said there, because he was not only getting out and doing it over and over and over, really hammering on his craft and honing his craft, but he was willing and open to hear how not just what he thought he was projecting, but how it was being received. And that was what enabled him to get better and better and better at it. Because I know there are times where we're afraid to ask for feedback. We're afraid of the criticism, or, oh, what are they going to think about me? But the reality is, it's checking the ego at the door and saying, they're working to help me and let me know what they're seeing so that I can make sure that the message that I'm sharing is exactly what I want it and need it to be to get to them. Because like you said, you didn't realize the anger was blocking some people. They were so focused on the anger they couldn't hear the message. And only by hearing that were you able to make the shifts to remove that or shift that or put it in certain places in the speech where it fit so that people wouldn't be disconnected. So that's incredible. And
it's an ongoing journey. You don't suddenly, because of the sensitivity of this topic, most people in the world of speaking have never experienced being truly heckled. And I mean heckled by somebody rudely over-talking you in the middle of your speech. because they're angry at something you said, because they take it very personal. Most people do not experience that, and certainly don't on what could be considered a common, not as the norm, not nearly the majority, but every once in a while, every year, depending if it's your busy season, it could be every once in a while, every month, depending on how often you're out there, have that happen to you. And you feel harm is being done in the room, and your protector jumps up. And still to this day, I have to be careful of making sure that I'm leading with love and not that the anger isn't leaking out. Because when those moments happen, natural human reaction is, you want to go there? Let's go there. Like that kind of thing, And because you are the subject matter expert, you've got this. Like there's no issue on how to handle this. The key is, am I leading with love, or am I just shutting down? And one of the things that I do really love along the journey is that 95% of the time I've learned how to naturally just lead with love. And it's what our clients love. They're like, what we love is when something goes wrong in watching the magic that starts to take place. Like when somebody says something or somebody takes it. And there's so many others that they'll say will come in and they stay so on script. So that when something goes wrong in the room, it's like they almost ignore it.
Yeah.
Or they just slam it and move on. And I did that in my early years. I understand that. And versus, let's dive into this, not with you want to go, let's go. Let's dive into this and go, really? Let's explore that. And have this educational moment for the person who truly is not trying to heckle me. They have been disrupted. Their life has been disrupted by something I said. And they're pushing back because that's uncomfortable. So how could I help them understand this so that it makes it more comfortable for them? And they want to do the right thing too.
And I think that piece is so critical, is that it has triggered something in them. So people have all kinds of responses. Some will yell at you. Some will act uninterested or be like, oh, well, this guy. But you having the wisdom to see that that's a defense mechanism, they're trying to protect themselves, push away, and then seeing, okay, this is a person who really needs this help, this message. Let's find out. Let's dig in. That curiosity and that leading with love enables you to connect with people that I think most other speakers would just like smash or ignore. And the other thing is, when a person gets ignored in a situation like that, everyone else in the audience keeps thinking about it. Everyone else in the audience is like, oh man, is he still mad or this or this? So for the listeners and for me, because I'm curious as well, because I'm starting into speaking now, and that's one of my fears is, what happens if I get heckled? What do I do? Can you give an example of a time that you actually faced where you had a really rough heckler and what they said, and then how you responded with love back to them?
Well, yeah, I mean, to give you an idea how common this is, this is going to sound weird and wacky, but this recently happened at a fundraiser.
Wow.
All right, so I'm speaking for a crisis center's fundraiser. So everybody in the room, it's a packed fundraiser. It's a very high-end dinner, raffles, everything. There's a lot of money raised at this event, a lot, to support this crisis center, which is phenomenal, right? It's like this is the epitome event because it does so much good for all these counties in the state that it was in. It was amazing. And I'm talking about, hey, let's keep giving tonight, so that this crisis center can do more in the local schools, because if we can get to the younger ages, we really could have a long-term impact. And I give an example of, for example, a lot of students are afraid to say no to a sexual partner, even when they don't want to do something, because they don't want to hurt the partner's feelings. And I'm talking about how dangerous this is, that we've taught kids, don't make them feel bad in a moment like that, because then the kid sacrifices all their own beliefs, values, and boundaries just to make the other person feel good. And I'm saying this, and the room's like on page with me, right? You can see people emotional, you can see, and then a person yells out, "What's wrong with that?"
Oh, God.
In a room of 300.
At a fundraiser for
right?
a crisis center. Oh, God.
Right. And this was people, because see, when I do my work, people assume my hecklers are 15-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Nope, this was somebody of retirement age yelling this out, because I disrupted their world at that moment. They were raised the same way, probably. I'm not saying this person, but generationally, every generation's been taught that lesson. Well, you don't want to hurt your partner's feelings, those kind of language. And so they yelled out, and I went, okay, well, I'll tell you what's wrong with that. It's just like, and we made it right. You asked, so let's talk about what's wrong with that. Versus going, how dare you say that? I mean, look at where we are. We are at a fundraiser for a crisis center. I could have done that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could have done, see, people, that's why you need to raise money today, because that answer.
Mm.
And by the way, that could have been very effective for the rest of the room.
Right.
But it would have been harmful. And that's not my job. In fact, I have a motto that I learned the hard way after I was too abrupt with somebody in education, and it was an adult, and the person on the phone call said to me, if you're an educator, if you truly are, Mike, then you would never be looking to do harm. You would never, your goal would be to never do harm. You harmed. This was years ago when this happened, by that one comment you made. And that's part of the learning process of you recognize, oh my gosh. And from that moment on, I realized I don't ever want to do that again. Now, no one can ever do no harm. That's impossible. Mm-hmm. But if you at least lead with the mindset, do no harm, it changes how you handle those moments. So let me give you one that actually happened this past year. I was in a high school gymnasium, packed. So all the students are crammed into the bleachers. And I see a student has raised his hand during the heart of my story that I'm sharing. So I know I'm going to get to it in 2-3 minutes, but I am literally telling I'm telling the part about my sister.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very emotional part. I know I'm not going to pause right there to take a hand from the audience. I'll take it as soon as I'm done with this. So 2-3 minutes later, his hand's still up. I go over to him. I go, yes. And he tells me to F off in front of the whole room.
Wow. The
entire high school. Yep. F you. And I was like, excuse me, what do you mean? He's like, F you. I'm like, look, you raised your hand. I'm trying to understand why. I've had my hand up for 30 minutes. Now, I knew how long that hand was up because my story is only 3 minutes long. So I simply said, I know it's been about 3 minutes because I saw your hand go up. And I know you did have it up for that whole time, and I appreciate that. I just needed to finish that so I could come over to you. Clearly, whatever you had to say was very important. It was very important because you're upset that I didn't come to you. What did you want to say? I'm not talking to you. And I said, that's a shame because you have a chance for your voice to be heard. And it must have been something important. And so what was it? So we can learn. That's very different than the old school had been. Excuse me? And I could have just gone attack mode and shut that person down. Right? And look, see, that kind of language, that's disrespectful. That's degrading, right? I could have done all of that. Versus, let's dive into this. And by the way, it didn't mean that ended well.
Mm.
You know, people always assume if you lead with love, it'll always end well. And I mean end well as it doesn't mean that person was suddenly like, now I really appreciate you because now you're acknowledging me. No, he was still in a place of anger. The difference was the whole room got to see me lead with love in that moment.
Mm.
And so it did end well because we taught, let's try to engage everyone versus shut people down. Now, I will tell you that he fired back with a disrespectful, degrading, I don't remember his attitude or comment, and I had to call that out, and we had a discussion on privilege. But even there, it was a lesson. It was because his anger was, how dare you make me wait? And so I had, since he then pulled a really disrespectful, either I don't remember his attitude or comment, I went and said, well, let's just pause. Let's think about the survivors in this room who've never been given a chance for the voice to be heard.
Wow.
And if one of us in this room has 3 minutes that we have to wait, and that angers us, and I understand that, but imagine what it's like for survivors who are waiting years to have their voices heard.
Wow.
That's why we're in the room. So that's where we took it.
Mike, that's brilliant. That's because you're practicing what you preach. You're being the living example of what you're teaching. But additionally, just that reframe and that shift to not only bring the attention and focus back on the topic you're sharing, but on the most important thing that people are there to hear. And for the people whose voices haven't been heard, for the victims of sexual assault, of rape, they're sitting there terrified. I know so many that feel so afraid or ashamed to speak out. They shouldn't, but there's so much stigma around this. And I think that's where there's so much power in what you're doing, is that you in that moment said they deserve to be heard as well. And you showed that he deserved to be heard, and he chose to use his words and his time to be angry and spiteful and be upset that his hand was up. But you demonstrated how that caringness and that willingness to hear can change things. And now I would really love to dive into specifics on two things. On one, what can survivors of sexual abuse, of sexual assault, of rape, what can they do to better move through, to be able to release, to be able to come through these things stronger? And what can we, as the people supporting them or the people around them, do to best support, provide, help, guide in whatever ways? So if we could start with the victims of these terrible things.
I'm going to reverse the start just
Sure.
so that there's fluency to it. And
Absolutely.
That is, I want to talk about how we support, because for survivors, if they know that we're supporting them, it makes it a whole lot safer to come forward. So I'm going to start with that. The mistake that was made for years was we protect instead of empower. And that was an awful mistake. So parents make comments like, anybody ever touches you, I'll kill them. Protect instead of empower. I'm going to protect you, but I can't protect you. So now I've scared you. That's what happens in those moments. Anybody ever touches you, I'm going to kill them. Now I'm afraid to talk to you, mom or dad, because I'm afraid of what you're going to do if I tell you I'm a survivor. That didn't do any good. Empower me as mom and dad look at me in the eye and say, if anyone ever sexually touches you against your will, without your consent, I am always going to be here for you. Always. That's empower. That's different than protecting. So we need to empower. Everybody listening can call family members today, sit down with loved ones and say, if anybody ever has or ever does sexually touch you against your will, without your consent, I'm here for you. We can all do that. And if a survivor says to you, that's happened to me, or they might say, I think that's happened to me, because sometimes it's scary to say it actually happened. So the default can be to say, I think, because it feels safer. Either way, if somebody says that to you, you don't want to give them pity with comments like, I'm so sorry. Or you don't want to act with revenge with like, who did that? Or how could that happen? Which now sounds like I'm being interrogated. Don't ask questions. When that survivor tells you that this has happened to them or might have happened to them, you say, thank you for sharing. Clearly you are strong. You are courageous. What can I do to help? You let them choose the path forward, and then you provide resources. So if somebody says, I don't know, I just needed to talk. Well, I really appreciate you're sharing with me. What about talking with a local crisis center? They're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You deserve to be able to talk with someone. Notice I did not say you need to, you must, you should. That sounds like I am telling you what to do and taking away your choices. No, you deserve. So this is your choice. You deserve, right? Huge difference in language. So for any survivor out there, that's why I said let's start with this, because it leads us to that conversation. For any survivor out there, know you do have strength and courage inside you that sometimes even survivors don't recognize, but it's there. It's there. I have met thousands, if not millions of survivors in this work, definitely thousands upon thousands, and it's there. So know that there is strength and courage inside you, even sometimes when you can't feel it or see it, it's there, and that you do deserve to be able to talk. And for years, people would say, oh, survivors don't want to talk about what happened to them. And by saying that, it made survivors feel like, oh, I shouldn't want to talk about this. Many, many survivors do want to talk. It's just they don't feel safe and supported to talk. Look, if every survivor felt that, look, if you came forward, I'm going to believe you and I'm going to support you, of course, being able to talk for a lot of people, not all, but for a lot of people, that's going to be healthy. To be able to just talk out what they're feeling, their hurt, their pain, their struggle, can be helpful to talk when you feel safe. And that's the important part.
So it's creating that safety first in that environment. It's not trying to dictate their actions, and also focusing on them, not us. Where It's not like, well, I'm going to do something, or well, who did that? Like you said, that just creates pressure, stress, or interrogation, and adds more negative emotion to an already traumatic enough event. So it's stepping back and saying, well, I'm here, you are heard, what do you need, and what's the best way I can support you? That's
exactly
great. Okay. Because I know oftentimes when people are struggling with difficult things, one of the most common things that someone outside looking in says is, I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. When I lost my mom to pancreatic cancer, and I would tell people that, some of my best friends from my childhood didn't reach out. And there was a piece of me that was mad, and there was a piece of me that was like, what the hell? But over time, I came to learn they didn't really know. They thought they had to say the perfect thing, but all I really needed to know was that someone cared and that someone was there. We didn't need to talk about that particular thing. Sometimes I just wanted to feel that people knew, they knew what I'd gone through, and they were there and they loved me. So to me, it makes perfect sense that it's just about hearing that person and asking them what they need. And I think that's also just a model for powerful relationships in our lives, is really being present, which I know is a huge focus of what you do, is being there with that person and finding what they need and how you can provide it.
Yeah, and that's just it, that this applies to any form of trauma. When people come up to me and say, my dad passed away, and I say, wow, thank you for sharing, it's amazing to watch somebody's eyes go, oh yeah, thanks for saying that. Like, because they're so used to hearing, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, which is a weird statement because you usually say sorry for things you did wrong. So when we imply I'm sorry for what others did to you, for the survivor, it can almost be insulting. I know some people go, how can that be? It just can be. Versus leading that with empathy over sympathy. There's a difference. Right? Empathy is that I want to come from where you're at, and I don't know it because I'm not there, but I want you to know I'm here for you. Where sympathy, people treat almost like pity. Like, oh, I feel sorry for you. That's not helping me. Right? That's not being present for me. So I think that's really important. Now, this is when things have gone wrong, and I think a really critical part that can happen is, and it's such an important. So I'm glad, Brian, you've allowed this space for us to talk about when somebody's done harm. The flip side of this, the ultimate opposite end of the spectrum, is what if we could build a culture of healthy relationships where this just didn't happen, where this was almost unheard of. So it happened, but it was incredibly rare, versus the culture we're in today where it's very common because of the way people are taught to date, sexually engage. It's very common. What if we could change that whole culture so that this was a rarity because we understood healthy sexuality, healthy sexual decision-making, consent, respect, wonderful, passionate, consensual sexual intimacy. That's where we want to get to. We want to get that positive outcome so that we're not having to have this happen so much.
Right. It's going back to the root of it and saying we're taught a certain way. We've taught through movies, through our culture, through the belief systems of our parents, our family, our community, how to behave and what's acceptable and what's not. And one of the really interesting things you shared in your presentation that, again, contradicted the norm was the whole "Can I Kiss You" presentation. This is actually exactly where I wanted to go next, so you led into this perfectly, is the concept of asking for permission for a kiss. And what's interesting, Mike, I'll be honest, part of me went, oh, no, guys can't do that. Girls don't like that. Girls want a guy who's assertive and knows what he wants, and you can read the nonverbal body language, and like all those things came up because that's what I'd been taught and that's what I've been taught in my life. And your responses to those, I guess, objections or those cultural norms, I think are so important. So can you explain to the listeners, because I was like asking, can I kiss you? It just seemed strange. And you said, why does that seem strange? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, he's right. Why is that unusual, or why isn't that the norm? So if you could explain why asking is so important, what it means when we don't ask, and how to do it in a way that doesn't create that awkward feeling that I think a lot of people assume would be created if we did ask.
Yeah, it's a great conversation, so I appreciate you opening this up. Here's the thing, and I'm going to even nitpick here, even the language we're using in this conversation. You said, hey, Mike, I had to think about asking for permission. And that's what people think of when they hear of asking. And that's the problem. It's not about asking for permission. It's asking for agreement. It's asking for mutuality. Does this person want to do this with me? Not, can I do this with this person? See, permission is, can I do this? Right? Mutuality is, do you want to do this? Huge difference. And that's what we want people to understand. Look, do you want to engage in sexual activity that is mutual? Because if you want it to be mutual, there's only one way you're going to know what that other person actually wants. You got to talk. Body language cannot tell you exactly what they want. What I always tell people is body language might give you the signal. It never gives you the answer. There might be a signal that it sparks in you and says they want something to happen here. It doesn't tell you the precise detail of what they want. And it's their body we're talking about. So I better know before I start touching another human being's body, especially in the most sexual ways, what they want. They should be part of that. So when we discuss consent, we don't talk about permission. We talk about mutually wanted, enthusiastic agreement between partners of legal age and sound mind that is in the moment. That doesn't mean if we've ever done it before, you get to do it again. That doesn't mean that if I say at 5 o'clock, hey, at 11 tonight, let's do this, and you say yes, that's consent at 11. No, at 11, you still have to want to do this. So we want sexual activity to be mutual. That's the key to all of this. If we view it that way, now it's fun. Why is it fun? Because now we're exploring. What do you want? That's fun. And if that's our mindset, what do they want with me? This is exciting. This is not a step-by-step, I feel like it's a contract. Those are the pushbacks you get from people. Because when you think of it that way, it tells me I know exactly how you're thinking of asking. You're thinking you're deep in the moment, and you're going to pause, stop, and go, hold on a moment. I don't want to do anything wrong. May I kiss you right now? Which sounds so horrible. And that's what people picture when they think of this. But when I say to people, let's imagine your partner's all alone with you. You are into them. You want them right then and there. They are right next to you. They look you in the eyes and they say, may I kiss you right now? Who is going to do this? Oh, that ruined it. That just totally ruined it. They're going to be like, yes, right? Or they're just going to want to grab you and kiss you because that is so passionate. And what's cool about it is, and audiences of all ages get this, when you know that your partner wants you as bad as you want them, when you know that person you're hot for is hot for you, that's hot. Only asking does that. And people say, well, no. If I'm just making out with someone, I'll know. And here's a test to prove that wrong that I do all over the world. I'll be in front of an audience of 100 or 5,000, and I'll say, how many of you have ever been making out with someone and we're literally thinking, do I really want to be doing this right now? And the whole room's like, oh my gosh, been there. Yeah. Right? The whole room. And you're like, yes, had they asked you, you'd have been like, no, I do not want to kiss right now. But instead you're sitting there going, here we are. Yeah, here we are. And the weird thing is the person making out with you thinks it's magical. And you're sitting there going, this is the worst ever. Asking would have avoided all that. If one of you had said, may I kiss you, and the other been like, you know what, I'm not feeling that connection, which, by the way, is the kindest thing you can say. See, we have a culture that thinks, well, that will hurt the other person's feelings. So instead you think lying to them is respecting their feelings. And lying to yourself is respecting your feelings? No. Respect their feelings and your feelings. Be honest. I'm not feeling that connection. Thank you for asking, because I so appreciate that. I love that you asked. Notice now I'm reinforcing that. You gave me a choice. Even though I don't want to kiss, I love that, and I hope you would always ask. That's awesome. That part was awesome. I'm just not feeling that connection right now. And so that's worst case scenario, that you don't want it. But imagine you say, may I kiss you? And they're like, yes. That's passionate. And if you are sitting here right now going, I just couldn't do that, then maybe acknowledge you need to slow down until you can talk about what you want or don't want. Maybe you need to start with, can I hold your hand? Can I give you a hug? Maybe you need to practice it with your family and friends. Can I give you a hug? Can I hold your hand? To learn the importance of language. Because here's the deal. If you are listening and going, I just couldn't ask somebody for a kiss, then you shouldn't be kissing anyone. Because what you're saying is, I'm too uncomfortable giving you a choice, so I'm just going to do it instead to another person's body.
Wow.
I think everybody's capable of asking, and when they recognize they're capable of it, they realize how easy this is. Look, going for it's really awkward. So this idea that if I'm going to ask, it's going to be awkward is ridiculous, because going for it is filled with awkwardness. It's guessing. It's anticipation. Is it right or wrong timing? Then you do go for it. They don't want it. This is like the worst moment on a date that you can have. It's filled with awkwardness. I tell people of all ages, if you were afraid of awkwardness, you'd never be alone with another human being in a sexual situation. You're not afraid of it. You're good at it. We are good at being awkward. And if you're married, you know this. And if you're mature and you're married, you've given up the game. You don't even try to be smooth because it's a stupid game. You'll just look your partner in the eyes and say, you in the mood tonight? Right? Your partner's like, yeah. All right, what are you in the mood for? Right? You can have fun with that. Versus, oh, I touched you. Why didn't you turn around? What? Well, when I touched you, that was a signal I wanted you. What game is this? Why didn't you just whisper in my ear what would you love to do right now? I would have loved that, because I could have said, oh, I'm tired, or I'm not in the mood. Or I could have said, ooh, hey, all right, let's have some fun. Instead of you getting all angry at me because of assumptions you made on body language. That's not my fault. You made those assumptions. We could have avoided all that nightmare. And by the way, this is single. The married people have these struggles.
Yeah, it's... there's my wheels are turning right now, because I'm like, wow, okay, and this. The piece that you said about that we want to protect their feelings by lying, it's that I think is so important, because I'm a person who's struggled with boundaries throughout my life and still do in some ways. That's a lot of the work I'm doing on myself, but creating the healthy boundaries and being able to say hell yes to the things I want in my life and no to the things I don't. And even when you ask the question, have I ever been in a situation where I'm making out with somebody or kissing someone and I'm like, God, I really wish I wasn't? Yeah, I have. It's like, there have been situations where I was like, oh, well, it'd be rude or it'd be awkward to say no. Like, even me, and I know like some people would be like, oh, guys shouldn't admit that. It's like, but men and women both experience this. This is such a universal thing. Like you said, married, single, it doesn't matter. And the understanding of respecting someone's boundaries, what I've heard from many relationship experts, from books I've read, one of the most important things to create in a relationship is security and safety. And to your point, what greater safety and security is there than knowing that your partner, whether it's a married couple of however many years or a new boyfriend or girlfriend, is going to respect when you say no? Because when they're going to do that in a sexual situation or in any kind of intimate situation, when it comes to other important things in life, you have that grounding and that foundation to know that they're going to ask, they're going to be aware of your feelings, and they're going to respect them. I think that's so critical, and it transitions into all these different areas and aspects of life, not just romantic or intimate relationships. So that is huge, Mike.
Well, that's just it. The problem is, unfortunately, lots and lots of people don't respect the answer, from single to married. What I mean by that is, let's say you do ask, hey, do you want sex tonight? Your partner says no. Most partners who are, let's say, they'll say, well, I'm horny. They won't give up there. They'd be like, well, are you sure? Well, what if I just give you a back rub? What if I just do blah, 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 blah? What if I just, right? And the problem is, they think that their sexual satisfaction, that's their partner's responsibility. And so now I blame my partner when I don't get what I want. So I have to convince you to give me what I want, because it's on you. And I'm not respecting the answer if I'm doing that. If you say, no, I'm not in the mood. In fact, Kara and I've been married 24 years. And if my partner's, if I'm like, hey, are you in the mood? Like, I don't know, I'm tired. I'm like, it's okay, just say no. Like, that's, just say, you don't even have to give me a reason. Because it's not on you to give me a reason that I agree with, right? It's not about me agreeing with it. It's about the fact you don't want to, and that's okay. That's all that matters. But that's not what's normally taught in our society. Our society says when you get a no, keep going till you get a yes in every aspect of life. So it applies. So people do it with sex. Oh, you're not in the mood? Well, why not? Well, should it matter? Does that play a role here? Now, don't get me wrong. If we're struggling sexually and we're not communicating, I do want to understand what you're struggling with. But in the moment, the heat of the moment, that's not normally what's happening there. That's you're frustrating me sexually in this moment. And that's a problem because now you're drilling them, you're interrogating them just to make them feel guilty or change their answer. Not okay. Whether it's a kiss or it's sex. If I say no, you gave me a choice for a reason. Please honor it. Please respect it. So we have wristbands that at every show that we give out, they say ask first, but the other side says respect the answer. They both have to happen.
Mike, I wish I had talked to you years ago because I did not realize how much unintentional pressure I was creating in my romantic relationships and in sexual relationships by doing these things that you're describing. Like I was the guy who was asking questions and being like, oh, hey, are you in the mood? And they'd say, not really. Or they just very clearly kind of move away. I'd be like, oh, why? What's up? And I was so focused on myself. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I was so focused on me, what I wanted, but also my insecurities. For so long, I put my validation as a man of my masculinity, of who I was, of my desirability in a woman saying yes to me or wanting to have sex or some type of intimate connection with me. And so I was needy, extremely like, oh, please, why? What is that? Or is it something I did? And it's just all these different things instead of just having the confidence and the clarity and the respect to say, okay, no, you don't want to, that's fine. And another piece that you mentioned that I really want the listeners to hear, because it's something I've been learning about recently, I think it's so critical, is the ownership. It is no one else's responsibility to make me feel good, to take care of my happiness in any way, not just sexually. And it's tough to hear because for some people and for my younger self of being needy and desperate and trying to have other people fill the voids in my life, hearing that, it's like, oh, well, now I can't blame anybody else. Now it's me. Like I can't look for other people to do it, but also there's power and strength that comes in that. And I'm not needing or requiring things from other people. And that opens the door for greater intimacy, connection, love, because it's no longer about what can a person give me. It's about what can we share with each other. And I think it's so, so critical and important. So thank you for sharing that, Mike, because it's unfortunately uncommon that there aren't more people talking about this, sharing these messages and bringing these things to light and showing how consent through respect can build healthy, deep, connected relationships. And to your point, lead to even greater intimacy. Because when someone says, hell yes, I'm into you, it's like, whoa, okay. Now we're playing ball. Now this is exciting for both of us. It's not that one person feels pressured or forced into a situation they don't want to be in.
Oh, yeah, it's the mindset, and here's the problem that's happening in society today, that we see it all over the place. So I'll give you an example. I spoke at West Point last week, and I've been there before, and there was a news article on it. And in the comments, somebody said, all they need to be told is don't rape. This is ridiculous that time and money is being put towards this topic. Now, to be fair, many people jumped all over that comment and like, do you understand why this is needed, blah, blah, blah. Here's the cool shift. 10 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. That thread would have gone all negative. Here, these people all jumped back in. But that mindset of, look, all we need to do is tell people don't rape. Anything else is wasteful time or energy or money. Well, that's the whole problem. You think it's just don't rape when you don't even know how the culture is being set up to influence pressured sex, unwanted sex. It's way beyond don't rape. It's, all right, what is consensual sex? Because you don't even know. You have this mindset that's just don't rape. And that's the problem. This is not a don't rape discussion. This is how are we currently engaging sexually that actually makes sure that everybody's choice is honored. That's how rape doesn't happen, right? Mm-hmm. But they think it's this animal person out there. this serial predator that is 1 in 100 or 5 in 100 in their mindset. I'm not saying that's the real numbers, and they're the ones causing all the harm because then they don't have to look in the mirror. They don't have to look in the mirror. If I think there's this animal out there, this monster out there, then I never have to look in the mirror, and I never have to be part of the discussion. The fact is, we have a culture that never taught people to honor boundaries, that taught to push how far you can go. That's a reality that most people agree in business and everywhere. How far can you get? How much success? How much this? How much sex? Like you said, and everything you said, Brian, that you look in the mirror and you think, I've done this. Almost everybody can look in the mirror and see we've done it at some point or time. Or that mindset kicks in even sometimes to this day. And we have to catch it. We have to catch it and go, whoa, don't do that. Because we're in a culture that teaches it so much. And so it's shifting the conversation from what not to do to what to do. So we don't have to be lecturing people on what not to do. Let's get to the to do. And that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. It really does, because it's putting the focus on where we need to go and not, it's like the difference between the parent telling their kid you need to stop and wagging the finger versus being like, here's how I want you to show up and here's what respect looks like to me. And in any relationship, it's so critical. So, Mike, I know we are...
I'll give you one more example before we because it's so important. Let's say somebody's thinking, all right, I'm married and I have a healthy relationship. How does this apply to me? Creating a culture of respect goes way beyond sexual intimacy. If you own a company and you're listening to this, how do you create a culture of respect in your organization? See, that's where we have to get to, where this is just the norm, where respect, not just in intimacy, but shows up everywhere. So I'll give you a classic example. Right now, with what's happening in our world, companies hear Me Too, and they get scared. And which is weird, because Me Too is not a fad. It's not a moment in time. It's a historical reflection. That's what it actually is. And so it's not something that you should be thinking, oh, I need to react to Me Too. I need to see that what's happening with Me Too means that we have not dealt with something we need to deal with forever. It's a historical reflection. So how am I going to shift moving forward with our organization? And the problem is now companies view their company the foundation of their company like a 20-story building. And they think, oh, we have a sexual harassment potential scare. That we have a crack in the 20th floor. Oh, we have a diversity issue. Oops, we got a crack in the 17th floor. They view each issue as its own floor. What they forget is that all those cracks are actually coming from the ground foundation. You failed to build a foundation of respect, and that's why all these problems are showing up. So even if you're not thinking intimate relationships, think about your company and what are you doing to create a foundation of respect? And that's the shift we've made. We still work with schools, military, everybody in the intimacy side. Now we're helping companies realize, look, if we could shift this all to beginning level, we're going to be at a whole new place in 10 or 20 years. So I want everybody to think about that, whether I work somewhere or I run a company or how I lead my family. How am I changing the foundation of what everything's built on so that I'm not looking at falsely and incorrectly looking at problems on the 17th floor and the 16th floor and the 10th floor instead of understanding it's the ground floor, which I have control over. I have the ability to how that's built and strengthened. That's where we need to be looking at. And it's the same in our relationships.
And it starts with us. It starts with each of us. Because I know a lot of people go, well, how can we change the country? And how can we change my corporation or this? It's like starting with our behavior, starting to have the conversations. And for the listeners, I really want you to hear what Mike is saying here, because think about it from a sales perspective. When you felt pressured into a sales situation and bought something you didn't want or felt forced into something, that felt awful. It's these conversations of consent, of respect, and it's not just asking, but it's also the willingness to say no for yourself. So it's having your own healthy boundaries and barriers and respecting those of others. I think that distinction that Mike makes is breaking all that down is so critical. So I really want the listeners to hear that. And Mike,
yeah, culture is singular, and that's too often forgotten. We think culture is billions. But okay. Culture only gets impacted by the singular. Our culture changes when the singles change, when the individuals change how they treat each other. That's because a bunch of individuals changed how they treat each other. Not at any one point did 1 million people or did 1 billion people one day say something differently. No, an individual did. who then got more other individuals to do that, influenced them, who got more individuals to do that. Culture is singular. You choose the culture you want to exist in.
That's interesting. I've never heard it that way, but it absolutely makes sense. It starts with one and then a progressive one after another, and that adds up to those big aggregate changes. So, Mike, this has been fantastic, and I know we're a little past our time. We have time for 2 more questions to wrap up?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right, so one question that's been in my mind that I'm very curious to hear, because it is a very tough topic to hear about that people are going through. I think some people avoid it because they're like, oh, it's just hard to hear about people suffering, and or it's like, ooh, it makes me squirmy to think about asking to kiss. But there's also the flip side of, on the other side of our discomfort is joy, freedom, love, connection. And because you've been willing to get uncomfortable with audiences, you've been willing to go there with them, you've been able to help so many people. So I want the listeners to know that that's true in just about anything. It's where your willingness to get uncomfortable, get out of your comfort zone, that will help you grow and help you be free. But what I'd love to hear, can you give us an example of one of your favorite moments, one of your favorite stories of someone who came to you, someone, whether it was a victim or a teacher at one of the schools you spoke at, and something they said to you that was one of those moments where you're like, I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do. And thank God I pushed through the tough early days and I pushed through the anger, because if I hadn't pushed through, I wouldn't have been able to be here today. Can you give an example of one of those favorite stories from all of your years doing this and doing this important work?
I have to admit, there's not a favorite, because each one has its own power. And so it's hard to rank them because of that. I am fortunate that I do get to hear some powerful examples of implementation of what someone heard us say. I'll give you one from last week, and that's the power of this work. People think, oh, once in a million you hear. No, when you're really out there and you're doing this consistently, that's the key. Consistency is everything. You're going to get the chance more and more to hear the outcome. I talked about being at West Point, and a student shared with us that they were in the audience the year before. They were not at West Point. They were coming to Shadow to consider going to West Point. And they were in the audience as a student looking at going to West Point. And now they were there as a student in their first year at West Point. Because of what I learned, they said to us, what I learned sitting in this room on a campus visit a year ago, I know I have personally intervened to stop rape and sexual assaults from taking place at parties.
Wow.
Because of sitting in this room. I know there were rapes that did not happen.
Wow.
And you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, that was literally just a few days ago. So that's just like, this is why we do what we do. I've had other people say, since hearing you, I totally shifted how I treat my partners. I only ask now, and it's amazing how much they love being asked. I've had survivors say, today was the first day I ever realized I was strong and courageous.
Wow.
And then I've had other survivors come forward and go, I heard you 4 years ago. It totally shifted my life and how I moved forward. I've had people say, I am in the career I'm in because of the day I heard you speak.
Wow.
It boggles your mind to think, oh my gosh, because you don't always know. You know, this is a work where you get off stage, and yeah, you may get applause, but you get off stage and the mind can wonder, what is this crowd going to do? Mm-hmm. What is this crowd going to do? Now, we survey every audience, so we know that answer, but even so, you don't know 5-10 years, how much are they still using? But when you get to hear those stories, I have met people that saw it 10 years ago, shifted their whole career field, and for 5 years they've been in the career they're in with a degree and everything based on something they heard us say, right? And so you never know what you're a medium for.
That is phenomenal. And I think it's such a, I was like getting emotional just listening to just imagining these people coming to you, sharing these things, people that were free, people that feel safe, people that feel hope again as a result of you getting on stage and being in front of them and sharing that message. And I want the listeners to hear this as well, because you see that Mike has been doing this over, how many? It's over 20 years now?
Actually, we're now, so my sister The assault of my sister occurred 29 years ago. So I've been speaking out for the last 27, 28 years. Now, there was an 8-year window gap. Remember, I talked about how young I looked and it was a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But I came back to this full-time in 2002. So the last 17 years full-time.
So for the listeners, 17 years. Now, I know we're in a time frame and a generation where we want everything immediately and everything fast, but because Mike has pushed through, because he was open to feedback, because he was willing to change, respond, and work to understand his audiences better and see where the gaps were in the existing system that most people, like you said, Mike, you started out giving facts and statistics, and then you found that that's what most people were doing, and then you shifted when you saw, I can use the things that I've done in my past. I can use my stage presence and my performing abilities to bring something unique that can get to people in a way it never has and bring about incredible results. And then, for the listeners, the reason I'm emphasizing this is you have an ability to do this too for the important things in your life. We all have something in our hearts, or maybe multiple things that calls us. You have the same ability, but it will take time and the effort and the consistency that Mike said. Consistency is key, and be open to that feedback and asking how you can best serve. We all have this capacity. So,
well,
Mike,
I'm going to add something I think that's super important to that, Brian.
Absolutely.
And that is, I told you early on in today's discussion that I was seeking security, so I went into business. Which is ironic because I wanted a career where you went home, it was 9 to 5, and that was safety and security. And for the last 17 years, I've spent 80 to 110 cities a year of my life in other cities, and days on the road. And it's the most safe, secure place because it's where I belong. Safety and security is not in whether financially a check shows up or whether somebody else has you employed. Safety and security is being where you belong, doing what you belong, and doing it consistently. That creates the safety and the security.
And what I think is also very interesting, one of your fears in that moment when you said, I'm just going to do business, was, well, I won't be able to have a family if I'm a performer. I won't be able to really be there for them. And yet, now, being one of the speakers who travels more, is booked more, is all over everywhere, you have one of the strongest relationships with family and your wife I think I've seen. I saw you with your wife at the event, and the love and the connection was so clear. So before we hit our closing question, if you wouldn't mind, because what I thought was interesting on your website was, instead of talking about all your awards and accolades, you said that your greatest award was having that family, your wife, together. That was the biggest reward in your life. Can you tell the listeners why? Yeah,
because you can't lead with love without love. having love in your life is everything. And I just don't mean love from others, because people can go, oh, I'll go find someone to love me. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about being able to share, being able to experience this world with others. There's nothing else like it. I've told people many times, they see my schedule and they go, how do you do that when your kids were growing up? And the last 17 years, my kids are all older than 17. So some of them knew me as in this other capacity before I went into this. Some of them were young, and they really remember this as what Dad did. So there's, they have different versions of between the four of them, but they're all adults now. And I explain to people, what I did was I set boundaries. So when my kids were in high school, for example, they all, except one, played high school soccer, 3 out of the 4. And so I shut down Mondays in September and October. That's the busiest season for colleges. That's when they all want us. And I shut them down on Mondays. And I shut a complete week down of every month to make sure I made at least half of their high school athletic events, right? And so that they knew their dad would be in the stands. Right? I coached all of my kids at some level growing up. So the one son was a swimmer, I coached him in swimming at one point. My sons that were basketball players in middle school, I coached them, if not for 4 years as an assistant coach, 1 or 2 years as an assistant coach. So I made sure that I was present and that they knew I was here for them. When they were young, we would blow kisses over the phone every night. Now, as they get older, they might not want to do that, and you have to be in their frame of not thinking, it's all about me. You have to talk to me every day. No, I have to honor their boundaries too, right? So you learn to honor boundaries and set parameters so that family environment can thrive. And Karen is just an incredible gift, without a doubt, to not just my life, but to all of our lives. And I am grateful that I have the 4 sons I have who have the spirits they have, the personalities they have, and that Karen is my partner on this journey. I couldn't ask for a better situation. And the reason all that's important to me is I am fortunate in that I was raised in a culture that said family is important. So I was given that gift growing up, and not everybody's given that. I totally get that. I was, so it makes it easier to prioritize this. I think it's just more natural because it's what you grew up seeing.
That's beautiful, man. And Mike, I want to thank you because this has been amazing. This is really enlightening stuff. It's changing and shifting a conversation that I think it's a conversation that most people don't challenge. It's just that's how it is. That's how culture is. So you're doing this important work to help people feel safer, more secure, to help people learn that they can have boundaries. So I really want to thank you for that. And before we go into the closing question, can you please tell the listeners where they can go to learn more about the incredible work that you're doing in the world?
Well, the easiest would be MikeSpeaks.com. That's the easiest to remember, MikeSpeaks.com. So MikeSpeaks.com. You'll find our social media is at the bottom of every page there. As far as you can find us on Facebook. Facebook, I'm Facebook.com/Mike Domitrz, but that's hard to spell. Instagram, I'm easy. It's at Mike Respects. Mm-hmm. It's at Mike Respects because we knew people wouldn't get our last name. So, but you'll find all of that at MikeSpeaks.com.
And for the listeners, I'll include it all in the show notes. So, and they'll have your name written on the show title, so they'll get the spelling there. But to wrap up, Mike, the closing question that I have for every interview is this: is normally I would say if you could go back to talk to your younger self at college graduation, what advice would you give your younger self? But for this interview, what I'd like to say is if you could go back to talk to yourself on that critical day when you got that phone call from your mom telling you about what happened to Sherry, if you could go back to talk to 19-year-old Mike right now, what advice would you give to him on that day?
First of all, nobody has ever asked me that question. So thank you, because it's a thought-provoking question. I think it would be find someone to talk to. You're not alone right now. You cannot be alone right now. And I don't mean you can't be alone as in you can't be physically alone. Right now, you deserve to have someone to talk with. This is painful. And when we're in a place of pain, friends and family, whoever we can feel safest with, find that person. If you don't have that person, talk to a counselor or a therapist. But talking is so valuable and allows you to think out so much difficulty and emotion. Find that person you can talk with, whoever it is, and talk and explore your feelings and know that they're all okay. There's nothing wrong with feelings. They're all okay, and explore them to help you move forward in this journey.
It's so important that people give themselves permission to not only have emotion, but to work through them, to talk through them, journal, meditate, to find their ways. So for everyone listening, you don't have to do it a certain way. Mike and I are talkers. We like to talk through our emotional stuff. That doesn't have to be you. But what is important is giving your feelings, giving yourself permission to have them, and also finding ways to work through the challenges in your life, because we're all going to face them. We're all going to have our battles, our hurdles, and our mountains. So the important thing is finding what works for you. So
yeah, and remember, I was told I couldn't talk, so I turned to journaling. I was doing like poetry, and I had never written poetry. I was writing poems. I think so. I'm glad you brought that up, Brian. Whatever works for you. And that's great, because it's being a talker too. I've had to find other ways, and I also have worked to create my own self-reliance in that, like knowing that I don't always need to talk about it, because at times I think I would create pressure for loved ones in my life through that. So journaling, poetry, actually even at the event, we in Q Life did that session where we all wrote poetry, and that was the first time I'd done spoken word, and it was amazingly therapeutic. So for the listeners, don't be afraid to reach out. You can reach out to me or Mike or both. There are different ways to get these things out so you can love more fully. Like all of these things that we're working to get rid of or let go of, it's so that you can lead with love. And we've got to work through those things ourselves, but we also don't have to do it alone. So,
Mike, thank you so much for the time and for the extra time today. I really appreciate this, and it has been really wonderful hearing your story and getting to learn from you today.
Well, thanks for having me on and having this exploration. I loved it.
It was so much fun. One of my favorite pieces from today's interview with Mike was what he shared about what we can say when someone shares something painful with us. Because I know so many well-intentioned people and people that want to help, that they hear something traumatic, they hear something intense, they hear this person they love, a person they care about is going through something painful, and the first thing that they think to say is sorry. And I'd never heard it framed the way that Mike framed it up today, that it has this almost guilt or responsibility or culpability to it, which gives it such an even more negative connotation. And just to be able to say, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing something so painful and vulnerable. It's almost like we're celebrating their honesty and their vulnerability versus applying guilt, shame, doubt, or more negativity to an already negative situation. And here's the incredible thing, guys. Like, one of the main reasons I love doing these interviews is I'm learning and growing along with each and every one of you. That's why I bring on these incredible people, because they teach me so much about life. Since this interview, I have had several people tell me tough things, and I've responded with thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you sharing something so hard. I know it's not easy to share, but I appreciate you sharing it with me. And the response is incredible. It's exactly what Mike said, that there's a smile, there's a, wow, oh, you're welcome. Because for many of them, I know it's the first time they've heard that, because God knows when we go through difficult things, that's not a common response. But in so many ways, what Mike is doing is helping us shift what the common response is, because the common response is typically not helpful in many different areas, to a response that empowers, that embraces, and one that leads with love. That's another concept that has been huge for me, is the idea of leading with love. Because ever since this interview, I've had several situations where there was someone that pissed me off, or somebody that I would normally have a negative response to, or that I would be angry at or frustrated with, and I would just pause, take a breath, and say, am I leading with love? And when the answer was no, I would say, well, how can I? And just asking those better questions can shift my internal reality to one of love, which helps me project and bring more love into the world, to share more love. And that's just the beginning, guys. That's where he talked about culture shift, that we can be the culture shift, but when we start with ourselves. When we have healthy conversations in our relationships, when we set healthy boundaries, we respect the boundaries of our partners, and we respect the choice of all of the individuals in our life. And guys, this goes far beyond sexual contact or intimate relationships. When we respect others' choices, we respect their decisions, and we respect our own choice and our own decision, we set our own healthy boundaries, life becomes this incredible, beautiful ride where we get to share what we really want to share. We get to be with people in the moments that they want to be with us, and then we get to have our independence in moments where others don't want to share or we don't want to share. We get choice, and that choice is so important. So I am so thankful for Mike doing his work and sharing his messages with us today. Be sure to go check out the Respect Podcast. That's Mike Domitrz' Respect Podcast, where he'll be sharing much more of the messages, the content, the ideas, the concepts that you heard today. You'll go even deeper. He brings on his own experts. So definitely check out Mike's podcast. Now, for overcoming graduation stuff. If you haven't already subscribed to the Overcoming Graduation podcast, why don't you go subscribe to mine and Mike's podcast? So search Overcoming Graduation, subscribe there, and then go and subscribe to Mike's as well. If this episode was of value to you, please share it out with your friends and following. That's one of the best compliments you can give and one of the best ways to get this message out to more people. Simply share, screenshot it, share it on social media, any way you want to. Helping me get this message out means the world to me. So thank you all for doing that, and thank you for everyone who has shared. If you'd like to provide a rating for the show, you can do so on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. And if you want to learn more about the Overcoming Graduation community, you can check out Overcoming Graduation on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. pretty much all of them. Can't really say that anymore, though, because social media is just expanding constantly, but the prevalent ones, let's say that. If you'd like to contact me directly to make recommendations for the show, give feedback, ask questions, have me answer a question on the air, book me for speaking engagements, you name it, you can reach out to me at brian@overcominggraduation.com. I want to thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you all for joining me on this ride. And thank you for sharing, for liking, for commenting, because that helps this show to grow and it's helping me reach even more people. So thank you for that. I love you guys. You have a fantastic day, and I will be talking to you again real soon.